Hello, everyone. It's Dr. Rebecca Branstetter, and I am here back with one of my school psych besties. This is Dr. Liz Angoff, and she is here for a very special episode of Coffee Break School Psychology. And one of the rules I have for having guests is they have to have a coffee mug that has their own personal brand or business on it. So okay, you're good. Fantastic. So Liz is a part of the explainingbrains.com website that helps parents and educators really understand how kids learn best and what do we do and how do we explain it to kids and families. So welcome, Liz.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so this is not just a prop. There is actual coffee in here. So hopefully you're caffeinated and ready. Are you ready?
I'm so ready.
Okay, fantastic. So as a school psychologist, I just want you to kind of frame up the challenge, the current experience for parents who receive, a special education assessment or a neuropsych assessment in private practice, and they get handed a report. Tell me a little bit about the parent experience.
Yeah, so we talk a lot on the professional side about how we write our reports to make them accessible to parents. But there are so many barriers there because whether your child was assessed at the school by a school psychologist or in an outside clinic, the person who is writing the report is actually writing for multiple audiences. They're writing for you as the parent to explain what they learned about your child, but they're also writing for the special education team, for a physician, for the next psychologist to kind of work with your child. And so it's just in the history of writing these reports, it just doesn't work in the favor of parents really getting those kind of important take homes for their child. The reports are long, they're full of jargon. There's often a lot of legalese in there that, to kind of cover our bases to make sure that we did all of the things that we're supposed to do, but it doesn't serve parents. And so many parents leave the IEP meeting or the feedback session with this thick report and just not really quite understanding what came out of the assessment. And the litmus test is always, can you go home and tell your sister, tell your dad, tell your best friend, what did I learn about my kid? And that is just really, really challenging to do in the way that we have it set up right now, the way our systems are set up.
Yeah, and as a school psychologist, we do our best to explain it in the meeting, but the reality is there's like an hour and you as a school psychologist may get 20 minutes. So parents are getting just bombarded with information, and I'm a parent myself, and I can imagine how overwhelming it is to get 20, 30-page report about your child's brain. So enter Dr. Liz to save the day. You've created a system, and there's 4 points to the system, and I normally do 3 points on Coffee Break School Psychology, but since it's my show, I'll allow it. There's no Coffee Break School Psychology police that are come and get us. You can talk about all 4 points. So talk to me about the first point, things that parents need to know when they get this report and they have all of this information. What's step 1?
Yeah, so when I'm working with families to really translate that report into those key nuggets, the first thing that we're looking at is, what did we learn about your child's strengths? So we want to know what comes easily for your child. What is my child good at? Where do they shine? What works best for their brain? So what are their strengths? And I love using a construction metaphor. And so we think about the highways in your brains, those connections that are going super fast, that come easily, things your kids like to do. And you should be able to walk away with 3 to 5 things that you can really name it as, what did we learn about what works best for my child? So that's the first question to ask.
So important. And we talk a lot in the previous episodes about strength-based assessment, and sometimes that gets glazed over. We're looking at, what's wrong and not what's strong. And so I love that you start with what is strong and what is my kid good at. What's the next area that you would look at and explain to parents?
Yeah. So once you have those nuggets, the next question that I would encourage parents to really ask of the person who evaluated your child is, what are the top 3 things my child's working on? So a lot of times in an evaluation, I mean, you had your child evaluated because there was something that was hard. So, and the person who evaluated them went through and found all of the things that are contributing to making this thing hard. Sometimes that can feel like a very long laundry list, or there might be a lot of jargon and psychologies in there, kind of like your child has trouble with executive functioning. So what in the world does that mean? And so asking, can you tell me the top 3 things that my child's working on, really like the most important ones? And then what do those look like in everyday life? Where am I going to see that? And really pushing so that you can visualize, okay, this is where it shows up and this is what it means for my child.
And so in your cool analogy, these areas that your child's working on, what do you use? Is it drilling down? Is it a jackhammer?
So you're talking about things that are under construction. So these are the things that you're working on, your child might be working on, or they might be the places where, the most direct route, like the most typical route is not the one that works for your child. So you have to create another way around it. And understanding why that direct route's not working for your child, and then what that looks like. And when we get into the tools and the construction crew that's going to help your child to build those other roads, kind of understanding why they might have to go a different way, or what it's going to take to get them on that route that's going to get them to their goals. So these are the things we have: your highways, these are their construction zones. And leaving the meeting with, okay, I know 5 things that my child does really well, they're highways. I know at least 3 things that my child is working on that are really the priority for them to build.
I love that. And I love the question of, what does that look like at home? How will I know executive functioning is rearing its under construction hat? I don't know what the metaphor is. I love that question, because then it brings it down to, like, when I'm sitting with my kid at homework and I see this, I can reinterpret maybe some melting down, shutting down, acting out as, oh, my kid's not, being bad. My kid might be feeling bad, or my kid's not giving me a hard time. They're having a hard time because we know that this thing is under construction and we're still building it. It gives you a little bit more empathy for your child, right?
It does. And I think it helps you talk to them about it too. I mean, your phrase about they're not giving me a hard time, they're having a hard time, really changes the way that we respond. And so when you have this vernacular in your family of like, I learned that your brain has all these cool highways and there's some things that you're building that are under construction. When we get to that point where we start to do, this kind of bumping heads at homework time, then we can say like, oh, you know what? I think we hit one of those construction zones. Let's just rewind and think about like, okay, this one's going to be hard. Let's think about a strategy for how we're going to get over this. Or let's just recognize that when we're working on something to build a skill, this is hard. And I'm going to be here with you through it.
I had this visual as you're describing it. I love metaphor of like literally putting on like an orange vest, me like, I'm on your crew, with a little hat, me like a little humor goes a long way with kids. Talking about, I know this is hard. Let's get on our hard hats together. I mean, there's just kind of fun ways to really build this into, teachers can use this. And it really kind of feels very growth mindset to me, where it's like, this is under construction. So it's not like you got it or you don't.
Exactly. And it's language that is just like really incorporated. I know in my own home with my 4-year-old who's got a lot of brain under construction. These are the things we talk about. And it does take it out of the moment a little bit when it's like, oh, I just realized this part of your brain's under construction. I got to back up and support you a little bit more. And it makes him laugh and kind of just like gets out of that hard moment to kind of get both of us in that meta place where we can kind of look down on the issue that's happening and figure out. I love getting your hard hat on for those hard problems. Definitely going to steal that and add it to how we talk about things.
I love it. And that's why I love geeking out on coffee break school psychology is we always learn from each other. And that's something we do all day long in the Thriving School Psychologist Collective is get together on Zoom and geek out about ways to help kids. So it's all stuff that I just adore doing with folks like you. All right. So let's talk about the third step. As I understand it, it's about diagnosis and eligibility sometimes, which can get really, really complicated. And a lot of times I found as a school psychologist, the meeting gets really hung up on what do we call it? And I often felt the urge to pivot to what do we do about it, given what we know about the highways and the construction zone? So tell me a little about how you as a school psychologist or as an assessor would help parents best understand, this sort of cluster of symptoms that we call this thing.
Yeah. And so I think that the what do we do about it is really important. And understanding your child's strengths and challenges is really, really important. What we call it is a way to bring together the strengths and the challenges in kind of one or a few terms that are going to help drive our intervention, the what we do about it. And so this is kind of our middle point. We're just using a way to like a shortcut to describe all those strengths and the construction zones that we just talked about. And so many parents leave the meeting not knowing what this is called, not knowing what their child's diagnosis is, especially when we have challenging diagnoses to talk about. A lot of professionals will, again, revert to jargon, or it will be kind of, they'll scoot around it because it's hard words to talk about. And our systems are not set up to really create space to help parents understand and give them time to process this. So I think we're kind of all set up for this. And so really making sure that we as professionals take the time to say, this is what this is called. And for parents to be able to push to say, is there a name for my child's profile? And a lot of times there is. And if were assessed with a school, that's going to be the eligibility category. That's going to be what the name is for the way that they qualified for special education. So is that under a specific learning disability? That's what this is called. The highways and the construction zones we just talked about, it's called a specific learning disability in reading. Or it's called an emotional disturbance, and that's how your child is qualifying. If we're doing a DSM diagnosis, this is called ADHD. This is called autism. This is, this is what intellectual disability looks like, and really making sure that we name it because that's part of your child's record. And when that shows up later, it can be surprising and just like really jarring for parents when they see these terms that were not explicitly laid out. And then, so knowing, is there a name for how we describe, or if there's not, I want to be able to face that also. There's not a specific name for my child's profile. It's very complicated, but here's how I'm going to understand it. And so bringing that to the surface. Another thing, especially when you're working with schools, that I'll encourage parents to ask is basically, is there something I can Google to find out more? Because school teams, sometimes they cannot use the DSM diagnosis equivalents. So they might not be able to go the step to diagnose ADHD, but that's where all your resources are. Or they, now we're using terms like dyslexia a lot more, but if you get a diagnosis of specific learning disability in writing, you may want a term that's a little easier to search and find. And so pushing your evaluator just one step further to say, like, what should I look for so I can find more resources is a really great way to make sure that you're on the right track when you start exploring yourself.
I love that. It's really empowering sometimes to get diagnoses. I have had students, little ones, 6, 7-year-olds, where I'm explaining the diagnosis to them. And I explain that they have a thing that's called this thing. And they're relieved, right? Like I say, one girl I remember so vividly, I was like, you have it's called dyslexia. She jumps out of her chair and does like this like fist pump, and she's like, yes. And I was like, tell me more. And she's like, that means I'm not dumb.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
That means I'm not dumb. Her older brother had dyslexia, and so she kind of knew a little bit about it. And it can be really empowering to kids, because if they don't know what the it of it, they have a lot of alternate explanations that they might come up with, such as I'm not smart, or I'm, my teachers hate me, like whatever it is they come up with. So it's empowering for kids and it's empowering for parents because, diagnoses are important to the degree that I think to one, understand what the it of it is. And that, like you mentioned, that opens up, well, we have a whole body of research for the past 20, 30, 40, 50 years on this thing. And we know what works, so we can target intervention. And diagnoses can also open up, services and accommodations that maybe students otherwise wouldn't be entitled to. And it can help shift the lens from teachers if they know, oh, this is this thing, and I know how to work with kids with this thing. So I love that you're naming that diagnosis and eligibility isn't just a scary thing that we have to get through, and it can be something that's really empowering.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and giving parents the space to really digest that, I think, is important. Everything you said is spot on. I think, like, knowing that you're not alone, knowing that other people have walked this path before, whether you are the child themselves or the parent who is trying to support their child, there is a roadmap out there. Somebody else has walked this path before is so empowering. And knowing that there is a community that's ready to welcome you, again, as a child, as a parent, as another supporter of this amazingly neurodivergent mind. It's so important to know that you're not the only one and you don't have to do it alone.
Yes, and we could have a whole another coffee chat about the celebrating neurodivergence and really focusing in on those highways and celebrating ways that kids, use their, bypass zones, whatever we call them. That's a whole other thing that I think we, is a different coffee chat, but very important to flag. All right, so lastly, the fourth tip for helping parents understand psychoeducational reports or evaluations that they've done on their child.
Yeah, so now we got to understand, what do we do next? And if you're going to leave with anything from this meeting or to have any take homes from the report, it's what in the world do I do now? And that's another thing that can be really hard to kind of glean from all this information is, okay, now what? Sometimes, a lot of times, professionals will do pages and pages of recommendations. And what we know from the research is that leads to far less action because there's just, where do I start? So I really encourage parents, and I, challenge myself to really choose the top 5 recommendations. If you were to tell me just the 5 most important things from this list that I can do right now, what would those be? And so whether that's you yourself going through the recommendations and just highlighting, here are 5 I can do, or asking your evaluator, okay, what is my next step? And 5 may even be too much, but what I try and do with families is really call out, like, here are the most important things for you to focus on over the next few months. And usually that's something for the parents, something for the child, for academics at school, something for the child emotionally, and something for the whole family. And so we're kind of calling out those really important things in different areas so that parents leave with, okay, I know my next step. And so now we have 4 key take homes from this however many dozens of pages report. And that's, what are my child's highways or their strengths? What are my child's construction zones, or what are the things that are challenging or they're working on? What is this called? What's my child's diagnosis or eligibility category? And then what do I do next? And so if you can answer those 4 questions, you will have everything that is most important to know from that report about your child to be able to support them in these next steps.
That's a great high level summary. And what I wanted is, like, let's just really go deep in this metaphor, Liz. So, like, if you think about, you get this report and you get all of these recommendations and all of this information, imagine going to Google and being like, I want to get from here to there. And they're like, here are 27 routes, choose them. You wouldn't know where to start. But these 4 sort of, I see them as quadrants, are a really great place to start. Can you look through the report? What are the strengths? Look through the report. What are the areas that are of need? What is the eligibility? What are the top 5? It makes something real big into something you can actually do. And it kind of eliminates that overwhelm. So I think this is a brilliant structure for this. Lastly, I wanted to kind of flag for parents that, there's a lot of this is not just a one and done, right? Like, oh, I learned my diagnosis and now we're done. There's a lot of resources out there for you. And I'm going to plug Liz's because she knows what she's talking about. For parents, go to explainingbrains.com/parents. That's the best place to go to get this information that you just learned today, plus more. And then also, humble brag alert, I was able to get Liz to be in my Thrive Hive TV network. So Thrive Hive TV network is an alternative to going down a Google rabbit hole once you get a diagnosis. So we have channels in there. It's like the TikTok of thriving, only instead of random people, it's people who know what they're talking about, like Liz. So I know Liz has a 5 to Thrive in there, 5 ways to explain a learning disability to your child. We have autism diagnosis. Now what? A lot of resources for parents in there, and you can get a free trial and go check out Liz's work in Thrive Hive TV. And I just wanted to thank you so much. Do you have any parting thoughts for our parents out there listening, and maybe even school psychologists and educators listening?
Yeah, I think we're in a really important place where we have at the forefront this conversation around how do we make this information really accessible to families and to children, and to really help parents understand what's going on at a very practical level so that they can turn around and take those next steps and turn around and talk to their child about what's going on, so that everybody, including the child themselves, can be at the table in this very active and, important way to make sure that our children are really thriving.
Thank you so much. Everybody go check out explainingbrains.com/parents. And I'm going to finish my my cup of coffee. And I look forward to having you on another time.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.